The leather folder sat in front of me, heavy as a heartbeat. Inside were the deeds. Grandma's 21st birthday gift. A $50 million hotel with my name on it. But before I could even breathe, the front door opened. My mother walked in, her new husband right behind her. "We should manage it together as a family," she said, smiling like it was still her world. When I told her, "Absolutely not. I'm the owner now," she snapped. "Then pack your bags and leave this house." I didn't argue. I didn't move because I knew something they didn't. That night wasn't about their demands. It was about Grandma's next move, one that would end their little performance for good. When people look at me now, they see the hotel, the marble floors, the glass lobby, the name etched in gold above the entrance. But what they don't see is the noise that used to live inside this family. My grandmother, Sharon Bennett, built everything from one roadside motel in Vermont. She was 21 then, my age now, and everyone called her foolish, but she turned those doubts into brick and revenue. By the time I was born, the Bennett collection had become a name people whispered with envy. My mother, Brenda, inherited none of Grandma's patience, only her pride. To her, success wasn't about building, it was about being seen. She loved camera flashes more than blueprints. She loved control more than family. My father, Mark, was the opposite. He was calm, steady, a man who believed in doing things right, even when it took longer. He ran operations for years, quietly keeping everything standing while Mom chased appearances. When I was 16, I watched that balance collapse. I still remember the night Dad left. His eyes tired, suitcase by the door, saying he couldn't stay where love had become performance. The silence that followed him out the door was the kind that fills every corner and never leaves. After that, Brenda remarried quickly. Scott Miller, a smooth-talking business consultant who spoke in phrases like synergy and global expansion. He was everything she thought success looked like. Shiny, loud, and hollow. Not long after, she sent me to live with Grandma, claiming it was for stability. I knew better. I was just one less witness. Life with Grandma was quiet but never dull. Her home smelled of cedar and coffee. Her mornings began with the sound of typewriter keys. She treated me not as a child but as an apprentice. I studied architecture while she showed me what legacy truly meant: discipline, risk, and the courage to start over when others call you finished. Sometimes at night I'd catch her looking over old property maps, the original sketches she drew by hand. She'd trace the outlines with a soft smile and say, "Every building tells a story, Joanna. The walls remember who built them and why." I didn't understand back then that she was also talking about people, about the kind of foundations we build within ourselves. Years passed. My mother's calls grew shorter, her words sharper. "You should visit," she'd say. "Scott wants to talk about the European market." I'd always have an exam or a project due, and the conversation would end with her disappointed sigh. We were strangers, connected by blood and legal paperwork. Until that morning, my 21st birthday, when Grandma asked me to sit at her desk. The leather folder was waiting, heavy and unfamiliar. She said, "This is your inheritance, but it's also your test." I didn't know what she meant. Not yet. But I would soon enough. Because sometimes the moment you receive everything you've ever wanted is the same moment you find out who's coming to take it from you. Dinner that night felt like a celebration. Roasted lamb, candlelight flickering across the long oak table, and Grandma smiling in that rare peaceful way. For once the house was quiet, filled only with the sound of silver against china. I remember thinking maybe things are finally steady. Then the doorbell rang. It was one of those small sounds that change everything. I got up, napkin still in my hand. When I opened the door, the chill from the porch hit me first, and then her perfume. My mother, Brenda, stood there in a cream coat, her hair curled just so, her smile stretched thin and glossy. Beside her was Scott, her husband, the so-called consultant, wearing that smug confidence that always smelled like cheap cologne and deceit. "Joanna," Mom's voice dripped with cheer. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. We were just in the area and thought we'd stop by." Behind me, Grandma's chair scraped softly against the floor. They didn't wait to be invited in. Scott carried a gift bag, the kind you give when you already know what you want in return. Mom's eyes darted around the house, landing on the folder still sitting on the table. My inheritance. We heard about your big gift, she said, her tone sugar-wrapped with poison. $50 million. How wonderful. I tried to stay polite. It's not about the number. Grandma wanted me to continue what she started. Mom laughed lightly, waving a manicured hand. Of course. But running a business that size isn't for children. You'll need experience, guidance. That's why Scott and I thought we could manage it together. As a family. That word family landed like a slap. Scott leaned forward, resting his hands on the back of a chair. It's too much for one person, Joanna. Let us help. We've already drafted a proposal. Grandma's voice sliced through his. A proposal for something that isn't yours. The air shifted. Scott's smile faltered. Mom shot her a warning look. That same cold defiance she used to use on Dad. Mother, please, let's be practical. The leather folder sat in front of me, repeated, heavy as a heartbeat, the word. Inside
Like
were
when
the
you
deeds,
mortgaged the
Grandma's
property
21st
without
birthday
authorization.
gift, a $50 million hotel with my name on it,
to expand.
But before I could
and
even
came
breathe,
back with
the
debt.
front door opened.
Color drained
My
from
mother
Mom's
walked
face.
in, her new
That
husband
was years
right
ago.
behind her.
Yes,
We should manage
Grandma
it together
said
as a
softly.
family,
She
and I
said,
remember
smiling
every year
like it was
cost
still her
me.
world.
I stood
When I
there
told her,
silent, the tension
"Absolutely
pressing
not.
against my ribs.
I'm the owner now."
The room
she
smelled
snapped.
of rosemary
Then
and
pack your
rage.
bags and
Mom
leave this
turned back
house.
to me, her
I didn't
voice
argue.
brittle. Joanna,
I didn't move
don't
because
let
I
her
knew
turn you
something they
against
didn't.
me.
We're
That
family.
night wasn't
We
about
should
their
rebuild
demands.
together.
It was about
I wanted to
Grandma's
believe
next
her.
move.
But the way
One
she
that
looked
would
at
end
that
their
folder
little
told me
performance
the
for
truth.
good.
This
When
wasn't
people look
about
at me now,
rebuilding.
they see the hotel.
It was about
the
reclaiming
marble
power
floors,
she'd
the glass
already
lobby.
lost.
The name
Grandma
etched in
rose
gold
from
above
her
the
chair,
entrance.
resting
But what
a
they
steady
don't see
hand
is
on
the
my
noise
shoulder.
that used to live
"Dinner's
inside
over,"
this family,
she said calmly.
My grandmother,
"Some
Sharon
things
Bennett,
aren't up for
built
discussion."
everything from one
Scott
roadside
cleared his
motel
throat,
in Vermont,
forcing a smile.
She was 21
Of course.
then. My
We'll
age
talk
now.
again soon.
And everyone
But
called
as
her
the door
foolish,
closed behind
but she
them,
turned those
I caught
doubts
the
into
whisper
brick
Mom
and
left
left
hanging
in the air.
By the time I was
Quiet,
born,
venomous,
the Bennett
meant only
collection
for
had
me.
become a name
This
people
isn't
whispered
over.
with envy.
And she was
My
right.
mother, Brenda,
wasn't.
inherited
The
none
next
of
morning,
Grandma's
the house
patience,
didn't feel like
only
home
her
anymore.
pride.
The
To
light
her,
through the
success
windows
wasn't
looked
about
different.
building. It was
Colder,
about being
thinner,
seen.
as if the
She
walls
loved
themselves
camera
knew what was
flashes more
coming.
than blueprints.
Grandma spent
She
most
loved
of the day
control
in her
more than
study.
family.
Doors
My
closed.
father, Mark,
I
was
could
the
hear the
opposite.
faint clack of her typewriter.
He was calm,
the
steady,
rhythm
a
steadier
man
than
who
my own
believed in doing
heartbeat.
things right.
Downstairs,
Even when it
I
took
found
longer.
the breakfast table already
He ran
occupied.
operations for years.
My mother sat with a cup
quietly
of coffee
keeping
she
everything
hadn't been
standing
offered,
while Mom
flipping
chased
through one of
appearances.
Grandma's
When
old
I was
ledgers
16,
as if
I
it all
watched
ready
that
belonged
balance
to her.
collapse.
Scott
I
was
still
pacing
remember
by
the
the
night
window
Dad
on the phone,
left,
whispering
his eyes
phrases
tired,
like
suitcase
potential
by the door,
restructuring and
saying he
joint
couldn't
control.
stay where love had
They
become
didn't see me at
performance.
first, and
The
for a
silence
second
that
I
followed
watched
him
them.
out the door was
Two
the
intruders
kind that
wearing
fills
family
every
as
corner
camouflage
and never leaves.
Mom finally
After
looked
that,
up,
her
Brenda
smile
remarried
crisp.
quickly.
"Morning, sweetheart."
Scott Miller, a
We were
smooth
just
talking business
brainstorming a few
consultant who
things.
spoke in
You
phrases
know, how
like
to keep the
synergy
business
and
stable.
global expansion.
Stable.
He was
Ask, keeping
everything
my
she
voice
thought success
even.
looked like.
It's been stable
Shiny,
for
loud,
50
and
years.
hollow. She
Not
ignored
long
the
after,
jab.
she sent
You're
me to
young,
live with
Joanna.
Grandma,
You have
claiming
your
it was
studies
for
your
stability.
friends.
You
I
don't
knew
need
better.
to stress about
I was just
payrolls
one
or
less
legal
witness.
documents.
Life
That's
with Grandma
what
was
family
quiet
is for.
but never dull.
Scott nodded.
Her
His
home
tone
smelled
oily.
of cedar and
Let
coffee.
us take care of the
Her
boring
mornings
parts.
began with the
You
sound of
focus on your
typewriter
degrees.
keys.
I
She
felt my
treated
pulse
me not
climb,
as a
but
child,
I said
but
nothing.
as an apprentice.
Instead, I walked
studied
over to the
architecture
counter
while she
poured
showed me
myself
what
a glass of
truly
orange
meant.
juice,
Discipline,
and let the
risk,
silence
and the
stretch
courage
until
to
it
start
started
over
to
when
itch.
others call you
Then
finished.
I turned to them.
Sometimes
Does
at night
Grandma
I'd
know
catch her
you're
looking
here?
over old
Mom
property
blinked,
maps,
lips
the
tightening.
original sketches
She's
she drew by
resting.
hand.
Right,
She'd trace
I
the
said
outlines with a
quietly.
soft smile
Then
and
maybe
say,
let her rest.
Every building
Their
tells a
eyes
story,
followed me as I
Joanna.
left the room.
The walls remember
Every
who
step
built them
echoing
and like
why.
a dare.
I didn't
That
understand back
afternoon
then
I
that
went
she
to
was also
Grandma's
talking
office.
about people.
She
About
didn't
the kind
look
of foundations
when
we
I told
build
her what
within
I'd
ourselves.
seen.
Years
She
passed.
only sighed
My
and said,
mother's calls
I
grew
was
shorter.
hoping they'd at
her
least
words
pretend to
sharper.
wait a week.
You should
Do
visit,
you want me to
she'd
call
say.
the lawyer? Scott
Yes.
wants to talk
She
about the
shook her
European
head.
market.
Already
I'd
did.
always have an exam
She opened
or a
her
project
drawer and
due.
pulled out a folder.
And the conversation
Another
would end
one
with her
identical to
disappointed
mine.
sigh.
There are
We were
things you don't
strangers,
know about your
connected
mother
by
and
blood
Scott.
and legal
Financial
paperwork.
documents.
Until that morning,
Deals
my
that were meant
21st
to be
birthday.
hidden.
My
When
stomach Grandma
tightened.
asked me to sit
Why
at her
didn't
desk.
you tell me?
The leather folder
Because
was
sometimes,
waiting, Grandma said,
heavy
her
and
eyes meeting
unfamiliar,
mine. she
The
said.
only way to teach
This
someone
is your
how to defend
inheritance,
what's theirs
but
is
it's
to let
also
them
your
feel
test.
how easily it can
I
be
didn't
taken.
know what she meant.
We spent the rest
Not
of the
yet,
day
but I
quietly
would soon
preparing.
enough.
Grandma
Because
called her
sometimes the moment
attorney.
you receive
I
everything
combed
you've
through
ever
old
wanted
files,
is the same
labeling
moment you find out
transactions
who's coming
that
to
didn't
take
add
it
up.
from you.
The
Dinner
evidence
that night
was there.
felt like a celebration.
Payments, transfers,
Roasted lamb,
ghost accounts.
candlelight flickering
By the
across
time
the
the
long
sun
oak
set,
table,
the house
and
smelled
Grandma
of
smiling
coffee
in
and
that
dusted
rare, peaceful
paper.
way.
Grandma
For
looked
once the
tired
house
but
was
calm.
quiet.
Tomorrow,
Filled only
she
with the
said,
sound of
we'll
silver
invite
against
them back
china.
for dinner.
I remember
Let them
thinking maybe
think they've
things are
won.
finally steady.
I nodded,
Then the
understanding.
doorbell rang.
If they wanted
It was
a
one of those
stage,
small
we'd give them
sounds that
one.
change everything.
But this time the
I got
script
up,
was
napkin
ours.
still in my
The
hand.
invitation was
When I
Grandma's
opened the
idea.
door, the
A
chill
polite
from the
message
porch
hit
sent
me
that
first,
morning.
and then
Dinner
her perfume.
tonight. My
Let's
mother
discuss
Brenda
the
stood
transition
there in a cream
properly.
coat.
I
Her hair
watched her
curled
type
just so.
every word
Her
with
smile
surgical
stretched
precision.
thin and glossy.
It was bait dressed
Beside
as
her was
peace.
Scott, her
By
husband,
6,
the
the
so-called
table was set
consultant,
again,
wearing
the same
that
oak
smug
surface
confidence
polished
that
to a
always
shine.
smelled like cheap
Candles
cologne
waiting
and
to burn
deceit.
through lies.
Joanna,
The house
Mom's
smelled
voice
of roasted
dripped with
garlic
cheer
and quiet
Happy
tension.
birthday, sweetheart.
Grandma had changed
We were
into
just
a dark
in the
navy
area
dress
and thought we'd
the
stop
one she
by.
wore only for
Behind
formal
me,
negotiations.
Grandma's chair
Her
scraped
expression
softly
gave
against
nothing
the floor.
away. They
Stay
didn't wait to
calm,
be invited
she whispered
in.
as she
Scott
placed a
carried
silver
a gift
folder
bag,
beside my plate.
the kind you give
Let
when
them
you already
talk
know
first.
what you want in return.
At 7 sharp,
Mom's eyes darted
headlights
around
swept
the house,
across the gravel
landing
driveway.
on the folder still
The front
sitting
door
on the
opened
table.
without a knock.
My inheritance.
My mother entered
We heard
first.
about your big gift.
Her heels
she said,
clicking like
her
a
tone
metronome
sugar
of
wrapped with
entitlement.
poison.
She wore red,
$50 million,
bold, deliberate,
How
the color
wonderful.
of control.
I tried
Scott
to stay
followed
polite.
close behind.
It's not
Tie
about the
loosened,
number.
grin wide.
Grandma wanted
Mother,
me to
Mom
continue
said
what
sweetly,
she started,
kissing the
Mom
air near
laughed
Grandma's
lightly,
cheek,
waving a
Joanna,
manicured hand.
Her voice
Of course,
was
of
smooth
course,
but sharp
but
underneath.
running a business
like
that
glass
size
wrapped
isn't
in
for
velvet.
children.
I'm
You'll
glad
need
we're doing
experience
this
guidance.
properly.
That's
Scott
why
added,
Scott and I thought
family
we could manage it
decisions
together.
deserve transparency.
As a family. I
That word
almost
family
laughed.
landed like a
Dinner
slap.
began in a
Scott
polite
leaned
silence,
forward,
resting his
pressed
hands
past,
on the back of a
poured,
chair.
but I could feel their
It's
impatience.
too much for one
The way
person.
Mom's
Joanna,
fingers drummed on
let
the
us
table.
help.
How
We've
Scott's
already
eyes kept
drafted a
flicking toward the
proposal.
silver folder by
Grandma's
my hand.
voice sliced
Finally,
through his.
Mom couldn't resist.
A proposal for
So
something
let's
that
be
isn't
honest,
yours,
she said,
the air
setting
shifted.
down her fork.
Scott's
Managing
smile
a business
faltered.
of this scale
Mom
is
shot her a
complex.
warning look.
It's
That same
unreasonable
cold
to
defiance
expect a
she used to use on
21-year-old
Dad
to handle it
Mother,
alone.
please,
Grandma
let's be
sipped her
practical.
wine, saying nothing. Scott leaned forward, voice confident. We've already outlined a plan. I'd handle financial optimization, Brenda would oversee PR, and Joanna, well, she could shadow us for a while. Learn the ropes. Their words weren't proposals. They were instructions. I set my fork down. You mean I'd sign the ownership over to you both, and you'd manage it? Scott's grin tightened temporarily. Grandma looked up, eyes unreadable. And how exactly would that benefit Joanna? Mom's smile grew wider. It would benefit everyone. We're family after all. That word again, family. It felt filthy in her mouth. I took a slow breath. You're right, I said quietly. We are family. She leaned back satisfied. Good. Then let's. Which is why, I cut in. It's time we stop pretending this is about love. Her expression froze. I pushed the folder toward the center of the table. You wanted transparency. Fine. Let's start with this. Scott reached for it, but Grandma's hand moved faster. She opened the folder, her fingers tracing the first page. The sound of paper sliding filled the room. Crisp, final. The leather folder
Grandma
sat in
said,
front of me.
Our bank
Heavy
statements
as a
from the
heartbeat.
Burlington account.
Inside were the
Withdrawals
deeds.
made under
Grandma's
Brenda Bennett's
21st
signature.
birthday gift.
Funds
A
that
$50
never
million
returned.
hotel with my
Mom's
name on
face
it.
drained
But
of
before
color.
I could even
Mother,
breathe, the
that's
front door
absurd.
opened.
And
My mother
Grandma
walked
continued
in,
evenly.
her new husband
These
right
are
behind
emails
her.
from Mr.
We should
Miller's
manage it
consulting
together
firm.
as a family,
Proposals
she said,
for overseas
smiling like it was
expansion
still her
projects
world.
that don't exist.
When I told her,
Signed by both of
absolutely
you.
not.
Scott's
I'm
jaw
the owner
clenched.
now. She
You
snapped.
had no right to.
Then pack your
I had
bags and
every
leave
right.
this house. Grandma
I didn't
interrupted,
argue.
her voice steel.
I didn't move
You
because
tried
I knew
to mortgage
something
the
they
core
didn't.
hotels
That
under
night
shell
wasn't
companies.
about their demands.
You thought I wouldn't
It was
notice.
about Grandma's
The air
next
grew
move.
thick.
I
One
could
that
hear
would
the
end
fire
their little
crackling in the
performance for
hearth.
good.
The
When
only
people look
sound
at me
brave
now,
enough
they
to
see the
speak.
hotel.
Mom's
The marble
eyes darted
floors,
to
the
me,
glass
desperate.
lobby.
The name etched in
Joanna,
gold
this
above
isn't
the
true.
entrance.
She's
But what they
twisting
don't see
things.
is the noise
You
that
can't
used to live
possibly
inside
believe.
this family.
But I didn't
My
need
grandmother,
to answer.
Sharon Bennett,
Grandma slid
built
one last
everything from
document
one
across the
roadside
table.
motel in
The
Vermont.
ownership amendment.
She was 21
she said.
then.
my
effective
age now.
immediately,
And everyone
all
called her
control
foolish,
transfers
but she
solely
turned
to
those
Joanna
doubts
Bennett.
into brick and revenue.
You are hereby removed
By the time I
from
was
every
born,
board and
the Bennett
trust.
collection had
Mom
become a
stared
name
at the
people
page
whispered
like it
with
might
envy.
catch fire.
My mother,
You can't
Brenda,
do this,
inherited
she
none
whispered.
of Grandma's
I
patience.
already have,
Only
Grandma
her pride.
said.
To her, success
Then
wasn't
came
about
the
building,
explosion.
it was about being
Mom
seen.
shot up from her
She
chair,
loved camera
voice
flashes
cracking.
more than
This
blueprints.
is my legacy.
She loved control
My life.
more than family.
You can't just
My
hand it
father,
to her.
Mark, was the
Grandma
opposite.
remained seated.
He was
You
calm,
handed it
steady,
away
a man who
yourself.
believed in doing
Scott
things
grabbed
right,
Mom's arm,
even when
muttering,
it took longer.
Let's just go.
He ran
But she
operations
wasn't
for
done.
years,
No,
quietly
she
keeping
shouted,
everything
pointing
standing
at me.
while Mom chased
You
appearances.
think you've won.
When I was
You're a
16,
child
I
playing
watched that
grown-up.
balance collapse.
You'll drown in
I
paperwork
still remember the
before
night
the
Dad
months
left.
out. I met
His
her
eyes
glare
tired,
steady,
suitcase by
maybe,
the door.
but
Saying
at
he
least
couldn't
it'll
stay
be
where
my
love
mess.
had become performance.
Her lip trembled.
The silence that
fighting
followed him out the door
humiliation.
was the kind
Then
that
pack
fills
your
every
bags and
corner
leave this
and never
house.
leaves, she spat.
After that,
the same word
Brenda
she'd said
remarried
days ago.
quickly.
But this
Scott
time,
Miller,
her voice
a
sounded
smooth-talking
small,
business
and
consultant
that's
who
when
spoke in
Grandma
phrases
laughed.
like synergy
It wasn't
and
loud,
global
just
expansion.
a soft, knowing chuckle
He was
that
everything
sliced
she
the air
thought
cleaner
success
than any
looked like.
scream.
Shiny,
You're right,
loud,
Brenda,
and hollow.
she said. Not long
Someone
after,
is leaving
she
this
sent me
house
to live
tonight.
with Grandma,
But it's not
claiming
Joanna.
it was for stability.
For a second,
I knew
everything
better.
froze.
I was
Even
just
the
one
fire
less
seemed
witness.
to stop moving.
Life with
Then
Grandma was
Grandma
quiet,
reached into
but
her
never
purse
dull.
and placed another
Her home
envelope
smelled
on the
of
table.
cedar and
A
coffee.
court order.
Her mornings
You've both
began
been
with the
served.
sound of typewriter
Fraud,
keys.
embezzlement,
She treated me
conspiracy.
not as a
The
child, but as an
investigators are
apprentice.
waiting outside.
I studied architecture
Scott's
while she
face
showed
went
me what
pale.
legacy truly
You
meant.
called the police.
Discipline, risk,
I called
and the
justice.
courage to start over
Grandma
when
said
others call you
simply.
finished.
Mom
Sometimes
stumbled
at
back,
night, I
shaking
catch her
head.
looking over old
You
property
wouldn't.
maps.
I'm your
The original
daughter.
sketches she
No,
drew by hand.
Grandma said softly.
She'd trace the outlines
were,
with a soft
until
smile
you
and
sold
say,
this family's
"Every
name for a
building
mirror
tells a
and
story,
title."
Joanna.
Two officers
The walls
entered
remember
quietly.
who built them and why.
Their presence
I didn't
polite
understand
but
back
final.
then that she was
Scott
also talking
didn't
about
fight.
people, about
He
the
just
kind of
stared at the
foundations we
floor as
build
they
within
let him
ourselves.
out.
Years
Mom
passed.
followed.
My
Her
mother's
breath
calls
ragged,
grew
eyes
shorter,
wild,
her words
caught
sharper.
between disbelief
You
and
should
despair,
visit,
she'd
when
say.
the door closed,
Scott wants to
silence
talk
filled
about
the
the
house
European
again.
market.
But this time it
I'd
was
always
different.
have an exam
Lighter,
or a project
cleaner,
due,
the kind that
and the
heals instead of
conversation would
haunts.
end with her
I sank into
disappointed
my
sigh.
chair, chest
We were
tight,
strangers,
hands trembling,
connected by
Grandma
blood and
placed
legal
her hand
paperwork.
over mine.
Until that
I'm sorry
morning,
you
my
had to see
21st
that.
birthday.
No,
When
I
Grandma
whispered.
asked me to
I
sit at her
needed
desk.
to.
The
She
leather
nodded
folder
once,
was waiting,
her eyes glassy
heavy
but
and
strong.
unfamiliar.
You handled
She said,
yourself better
"This
than
is
I
your
ever
inheritance."
did.
But
I
it's
looked at
also
the
your
empty
test.
plates, the folded
I didn't
napkins,
know what she meant.
the remnants
Not
of the
yet,
storm we just
but I
survived.
would soon enough.
Do you think
Because
she'll
sometimes
ever
the
forgive
moment
us?
you receive
I
everything
asked
you've ever
quietly.
wanted is the same
Grandma
moment you
sighed.
find out who's coming to take it
Forgiveness
from
is
you.
for people who
Dinner
admit
that night
what they've
felt like a
done.
celebration.
Your mother still
Roasted
thinks
lamb,
she was robbed.
candlelight flickering
The fire
across the long
popped
oak
softly,
table,
throwing
and Grandma
gold across
smiling
the
in that
table.
rare, peaceful
I
way.
realized then that
For
this
once the house was
the
quiet,
same one where my father
filled
walked
only
out
with
years
the
ago,
sound of silver
where every
against
fight
china.
echoed louder
I
than
remember
love.
thinking maybe
Finally
things are
felt
finally
still.
steady.
Then
I
the
stood
doorbell
and
rang.
walked to the window.
It was one of those small
Outside,
sounds
red
that
and blue
change
lights
everything.
painted the
I
driveway.
got up, napkins
Scott
still in my
sat in the
hand.
back of a cruiser.
When I opened the door,
Mom stood
the chill
frozen
from the
near
porch
the
hit me first.
mascara
and then
streaking
her
down her
perfume.
face.
My mother,
I
Brenda,
didn't feel
stood there in a
triumph.
cream coat.
I didn't even
her hair
feel
curled
relief.
just so.
Just an
Her
ache,
smile
deep and
stretched
quiet,
thin and
for
glossy.
the family we could have
Beside
been.
her was Scott,
Grandma
her
joined
husband,
me, the
her
so-called
reflection
consultant,
beside mine
wearing
in the
that
glass.
smug confidence
You did
that always
good,
smelled
Joanna,
like
she
cheap
said.
cologne and deceit.
You didn't raise your
Joanna,
voice.
Mom's
You
voice
raised
dripped
your
with
worth.
cheer.
Her words
Happy
settled
birthday,
in my chest
sweetheart.
like something
We
permanent.
were just in the area,
and as the last
thought
car
we'd stop
disappeared
by.
down the hill,
Behind me,
the night
Grandma's
finally
chair
exhaled.
scraped softly
We didn't
against
toast,
the floor.
didn't celebrate.
They didn't wait
We
to
just
be invited
sat in the quiet glow
Scott
of the fire.
carried a gift bag.
Two women who'd
the kind you
survived the
give
same
when you already
bloodline
know
in
what you
different
want in
decades.
return.
Finally
Mom's
breaking the
eyes
pattern.
darted around
the
the
morning
house,
after felt
landing on
unreal.
the folder still
the
sitting
same
on the
house
table.
that had echoed
My
with shouting
inheritance
now hummed with
We
quiet.
heard about your
the
big
kind
gift,
that follows
she
a
said.
storm.
Her tone sugar
Sunlight
wrapped with
slipped
poison.
through the curtains.
$50
landing on the
million.
folder still
How
sitting at the
wonderful.
center of the dining
I
table.
tried to stay polite.
The one that had
It's
ended
not
it all.
about the number.
Grandma was already
Grandma
up,
wanted me to
sipping
continue
coffee
what
in the
she
kitchen
started.
like nothing
Mom
extraordinary
laughed
had
lightly,
happened,
waving
but her
a
shoulders
manicured
looked
hand.
lighter,
Of
her
course,
face
of course.
softer.
But
As if
running a
decades
business
of weight
that
had
size
finally
isn't
lifted.
for children.
The news
You'll
spread
need
fast.
experience, guidance.
Scott disappeared
That's
from
why
the state
Scott and
before
I
the
thought we could manage
investigation
it
could
together.
close. As a
My
family,
mother, Brenda,
that word
stayed
family
just long
landed
enough
like
to
a
watch her
slap.
name unravel
Scott
in
leaned
every
forward,
business circle she once
resting his
worshipped.
hands on the
The
back
fraud
of a chair.
case stripped her
It's
of
too
everything.
much for one person,
Money,
Joanna.
position, pride.
Let us help.
Dad Mark
We've
came by
already
that
drafted
afternoon.
a proposal.
No speeches,
Grandma's
no questions.
voice sliced through his.
He simply
A
placed a
proposal
hand on
for something
Grandma's
that
shoulder
isn't
and
yours. You
The
did
air
the right
shifted.
thing. When
Scott's
his eyes
smile
met
faltered.
mine, they didn't hold
Mom
pity.
shot her a warning
Only
look.
pride.
That same
Weeks
cold
later,
defiance she used
life
to use
began
on
to
Dad.
look almost
Mother,
ordinary
please,
again.
let's be practical.
I finished my final architecture
Practical.
presentation.
Grandma repeated,
Graduated
as
top
if
of my
tasting
class.
the word.
Grandma
Like when you
insisted
mortgaged
we
the
celebrate
Burlington
quietly
property
at the
without
hotel's
authorization.
rooftop.
No
Or
press,
when you
no guests,
disappeared
just
for
us.
6 months to
She
expand,
raised her glass and said,
came back with
to new
debt.
foundations.
Color drained from
And as
Mom's
the city
face.
lights glowed below,
That was years
I
ago.
realized that was exactly
Yes,
what this
Grandma
was.
said softly.
A rebuild, not
And
of
I
property
remember
or
every year
reputation,
it
but of
cost me.
peace. I stood there silent, the tension pressing against my ribs. The room smelled of rosemary and rage. Mom turned back to me, her voice brittle. Joanna, don't let her turn you against me. Or family. We should rebuild together. I wanted to believe her, but the way she looked at that folder told me the truth. This wasn't about rebuilding. It was about reclaiming power she'd already lost. Grandma rose from her chair, resting a steady hand on my shoulder. Dinner's over, she said calmly. Some things aren't up for discussion. Scott cleared his throat, forcing a smile. Of course. We'll talk again soon. But as the door closed behind them, I caught the whisper Mom left hanging in the air. Quiet, venomous, meant only for me. This isn't over. And she was right. It wasn't. The next morning, the house didn't feel like home anymore. The light through the windows looked different. Colder, thinner. As if the walls themselves knew what was coming. Grandma spent most of the day in her study, doors closed. I could hear the faint clack of her typewriter, the rhythm steadier than my own heartbeat. Downstairs, I found the breakfast table already occupied. My mother sat with a cup of coffee she hadn't been offered, flipping through one of Grandma's old ledgers as if it already belonged to her. Scott was pacing by the window on the phone, whispering phrases like potential restructuring and joint control. They didn't see me at first, and for a second I watched them. Two intruders wearing family as camouflage. Mom finally looked up, her smile crisp. Morning, sweetheart. We were just brainstorming a few things. You know, how to keep the business stable. Stable? Asked, keeping my voice even. It's been stable for 50 years. She ignored the jab. You're young, Joanna. You have your studies, your friends. You don't need to stress about payrolls or legal documents. That's what family is for. Scott nodded, his tone oily. Let us take care of the boring parts. You focus on your degree. I felt my pulse climb, but I said nothing. Instead, I walked over to the counter, poured myself a glass of orange juice, and let the silence stretch until it started to itch. Then I turned to them. Does Grandma know you're here? Mom blinked, lips tightening. She's resting. Right, I said quietly. Then maybe let her rest. Their eyes followed me as I left the room, every step echoing like a dare. That afternoon I went to Grandma's office. She didn't look surprised when I told her what I'd seen. She only sighed and said, I was hoping they'd at least pretend to wait a week. Do you want me to call the lawyer? Yes. She shook her head. Already did. She opened her drawer and pulled out a folder, another one identical to mine. There are things you don't know about your mother and Scott. Financial documents. Deals that were meant to be hidden. My stomach tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Because sometimes, Grandma said, her eyes meeting mine, the only way to teach someone how to defend what's theirs is to let them feel how easily it can be taken. We spent the rest of the day quietly preparing. Grandma called her attorney. I combed through old files, labeling transactions that didn't add up. The evidence was there. Payments, transfers, ghost accounts. By the time the sun set, the house smelled of coffee and dusted paper. Grandma looked tired but calm. Tomorrow, she said, we'll invite them back for dinner. Let them think they've won. I nodded, understanding. If they wanted a stage, we'd give them one. But this time the script was ours. The invitation was Grandma's idea. A polite message sent that morning. Dinner tonight. Let's discuss the transition properly. I watched her type every word with surgical precision. It was bait dressed as peace. By 6, the table was set again. The same oak surface polished to a shine, candles waiting to burn through lies. The house smelled of roasted garlic and quiet tension. Grandma had changed into a dark navy dress, the one she wore only for formal negotiations. Her expression gave nothing away. "Stay calm," she whispered as she placed a silver folder beside my plate. "Let them talk first." At 7 sharp, headlights swept across the gravel driveway. The front door opened without a knock. My mother entered first, her heels clicking like a metronome of entitlement. She wore red, bold, deliberate, the color of control. Scott followed close behind, tie loosened, grin wide. "Mother," Mom said sweetly, kissing the air near Grandma's cheek. "Joanna." Her voice was smooth but sharp underneath, like glass wrapped in velvet. "I'm glad we're doing this properly." Scott added, "Family decisions deserve transparency." I almost laughed. Dinner began in a polite silence. Plates passed, wine poured, but I could feel their impatience. The way Mom's fingers drummed on the table, how Scott's eyes kept flicking toward the silver folder by my hand. Finally, Mom couldn't resist. "So, let's be honest," she said, setting down her fork. "Managing a business of this scale is complex. It's unreasonable to expect a 21-year-old to handle it alone." Grandma sipped her wine, saying nothing. Scott leaned forward, voice confident. "We've already outlined a plan. I'd handle financial optimization, Brenda would oversee PR, and Joanna, well, she could shadow us for a while. Learn the ropes." Their words weren't proposals. They were instructions. I set my fork down. "You mean I'd sign the ownership over to you both, and you'd manage it?" Scott's grin tightened temporarily. Grandma looked up, eyes unreadable. "And how exactly would that benefit Joanna?" Mom's smile grew wider. "It would benefit everyone. We're family after all." That word again, family. It felt filthy in her mouth. I took a slow breath. "You're right," I said quietly. "We are family." She leaned back satisfied. "Good. Then let's." "Which is why," I cut in, "it's time we stop pretending this is about love." Her expression froze. I pushed the folder toward the center of the table. "You wanted transparency. Fine. Let's start with this." Scott reached for it, but Grandma's hand moved faster. She opened the folder, her fingers tracing the first page. The sound of paper sliding filled the room. Crisp, final.